I'd like us to begin with a short breath meditation to help center ourselves in this contemplative space. So take a moment to do anything you need to do to get comfortable in your seat. You can close your eyes or focus on the photograph on the screen, but begin to turn your attention to your breath. Become conscious of each in-breath and out-breath. Breathe in slowly, hold it, and breathe out slowly. And you can do that a few times. Take another deep breath in and out and notice how you feel in your whole body. Take another breath in and out and notice how the room around you feels. Take a breath for the day you have had so far. And another breath for this precious moment, which cannot be recreated. And finally, another breath for the day and night to come. Now slowly open your eyes and bring your attention back to the screen. As I said, for 30 years now, I have been studying the relationship between human spiritual development and leadership. It is my passion because I believe such development leads to a maturity that is necessary to leading, living, and working successfully with and for others. Now it may be a maturity desperately needed to save Earth's community of life. Oops. It was my own spiritual experience and the sense of the sacred I met in nature that brought me as a young adult into a commitment to the ecology movement in the 1970s. Later, I began to question why campaigns such as Keep America Beautiful were ineffective. I began to wonder if ecological consciousness was a journey that happened from the inside out. People didn't seem to stop littering when told and encouraged to do so. So perhaps something had to change in what they believed about themselves and their relationship to others and the planet. We don't have time to go into it now, but there are historical reasons, I discovered, behind the loss of an ecological consciousness as Western cultures industrialized and lost a sense of interconnectedness that many indigenous cultures took for granted. And being spiritual came to focus more on personal piety. In the mid-1980s, after my BVM formation, I joined the staff at Mundelein College, Chicago. While working there, I pursued an MA in religious studies. My courses included one called Transformation Spirituality, a feminist approach. I learned that though it has many names, personal transformation essentially is about a change in consciousness that leads to new behaviors. It was during my time at Mundelein that I began to see linkages between my studies in ecology, feminism, and spirituality, as did others whose research and writings began to overlap. Together, these insights from my reading and reflection in the 80s and 90s opened into an exploration into and teaching of their convergence in the ecofeminist spirituality movement. While it was under development, I attended public hearings on the draft of the Earth Charter, which you may have heard about. And at the time, I questioned that though the draft contained over 70 items on its to-do list, no one seemed to be talking about the personal transformation that would need to take place before an individual would choose to act on that to-do list. And I wrote the committee regarding this. And here was a document that was supposed to inspire in all peoples a sense of global interdependence and shared responsibility. And but what, again, like the ecology movement, what would make people want to do this? I was pleased then, after the adoption of the charter, to at least see in its concluding section the statement, "This will require a change of mind and heart." What is meant by that line is described in the next one. It requires a new sense of global interdependence and universal responsibility. To me, achieving that requires an understanding of the dynamics of spiritual transformation. To illustrate, I now invite you into a brief guided meditation. I would like you to contemplate the photograph on this slide, or close your eyes, whichever helps you more. But imagine you are sitting on a beach. As have humans for millennia before us, you pause, caught up in the beauty of the sight of the sun, slowly moving closer to the line of the horizon in the last moments of its daily journey. As the minutes pass, you witness the sun move down, 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 until it finally, gently slips out of sight. And once again, as on countless days through the millennia, the sun has set. Now I invite you to rewind and replay that whole scene in your mind. You are back sitting on the beach. Only this time, consider what is happening with the full knowledge and awareness that the sun is not dropping down anywhere. In reality, the sun disappears from your sight because you, the beach upon which you are sitting, and in fact the entire planet Earth, are all spinning, from your perspective, away from the sun. Take a moment to really feel that whole experience. Feel the struggle in your body and in your psyche to let go of past assumptions and transit the paradigm shift of consciousness around what is really happening in that moment on the beach. I want to suggest that it is a mental shift of this kind and magnitude that we are being asked to undergo today regarding our understanding of the role of spirituality and inner human development in evolving life-sustaining practices for our time. It is a profound shift impacting everything that touches our lives, our spirituality, theology, psychology, economy, politics, society. Fundamental to that shift is a new understanding of what it means to be fully human. The good news is that over the past several decades, as we recover our explorations into the interior dimensions of what it means to be human, new definitions of spirituality are emerging to help us grasp the significance of this historic umbrella term that seems to refer to both our being and our way of living. This comment by Eckhart Tolle is an illustrative and provocative one. How spiritual you are has nothing to do with what you believe, but everything to do with your state of consciousness. I have asked people in workshops and explored various resources looking for what the experience of a spiritual person looks like. A few are noted on this slide. Living as who we really are, the deepest self. Persons who honor, quote, forces or a presence greater than ourselves. Persons who celebrate the oneness of everything. My question has always been, how do these persons we recognize as spiritual get that way? Apparently, we get there through stages. A few years ago, I met the author Margaret Placentra Johnston. She's an eye doctor who recently discovered the research on the stages of human spiritual development by reading Scott Peck, and was so taken up with it that she has dedicated herself to spreading that news more broadly in her books, Faith Beyond Belief and Overcoming Spiritual Myopia. After studying all the theories, she has concluded that they all point to growth in conscious awareness that all is one, and what it truly means to be capable of love. This chart by the Dutch author Margaret van den Brink summarizes more simply the research on the changes that take place through the stages of our growth in consciousness. I recommend her website where she has a lot of information on this. But it's really, in simple terms, the growth from a focus as infants in which our total consciousness is wrapped around, it's all about me, I need my diaper changed, I need my food, ultimately to moving through an identity with an original group, our family, our school, and then growing through adolescence into seeing what I can do. And then, so it goes through stages. And the ultimate stage is one in which we recognize that we are all one, that we're all interdependent. I think this quote from Van Gogh might speak to a lot of us. I have a terrible need, shall I say the word, of religion. Then I go out at night and paint the stars. Then there is this description of an image of God by Alice Walker in her book, The Color Purple. My first step from the old white man as God was trees, then air, then birds, then other people. But one day when I was sitting quiet like a motherless child, which I was, it come to me, that feeling of being part of everything, not separate at all. I knew that if I cut a tree, my arm would bleed. And I laughed and I cried and I ran around the house. So I'm coming to think in this way about spirituality, that spirituality is a word that points toward the fact that our reality is connectedness, and it's manifested in our very being. And that might be unconsciously at first or subconsciously, but then finally, as our awareness grows, it happens consciously. So spirituality is then, in its truest sense, eco-spirituality, which I see as a corrective term, helping us to consciously direct our attention to our interconnectedness. So here's my working definition at the moment. You know, that spirituality is about living ever more consciously and with ever more integrity, our profound interrelationship within the community of life. So with that as background, I want us now to move into considering our BVM core values. Of freedom, charity, education, and justice. First, one short definition of what we mean by a value. I really like this one from my DePaul colleague, Ron Nazer, who also is a good friend of the BVMs and was used to be connected with Mundelein College. Important here are the words consciously or unconsciously again. He says it's a value is any belief, principle, or virtue held so consciously or unconsciously that it guides our behaviors, decisions, and actions. So there's a way in which our interconnectedness might instinctively or unconsciously help us to choose in decisions or behaviors, things that we sometimes think, why did I do that? Or what motivated me to be so passionate about that? And I think it's because it intrinsically, deeply within us is this knowledge and awareness of our relationships, our interrelationships, our connectedness. And so it's important for us to bring those things to consciousness so that we can be clear about what our values are if we want to have a positive influence in the world. Okay, I hope you enjoyed that conversation with each other, and it was fruitful. What I'd like to do now is just share another comment about a definition of values. That's one of my favorite lines from Stephen Covey. And Covey says, even a gang of thieves can share values. But the issue is which values promote ongoing life. And he puts that comment in the context of talking about the fact that there are principles that are deep fundamental truths that have universal application, like growth. Growth is just a deep fundamental principle that functions in the universe. So the question is, how might we more consciously live our BVM core values aligned with the principles fundamental to our evolving universe and its community of life? So let's take a look at more closely at each of our core values. This is something that we have as the definition on our website and our booklets for what we mean by the value of freedom. We become who we are, called to be at the deepest core of our being. So who are we? Thomas Berry would say, our role and rationale is to be in communion with all living things, to realize the deepest reality of our universe is mutual indwelling. So in freedom, we become more and more in communion with others. And we get this sense that we are able to grow together in mutual indwelling. This is said similarly by some of the indigenous tribes of Africa who speak of the concept of Ubuntu, which in English means I am because we are. In other words, we become who we are called to be in community. This is, here in the United States, with its dominant value of individualism, an important countercultural belief rooted in the reality of our existence in an interdependent universe and in our very brains. As the German neurobiologist Gerald Huther teaches, our brain is much more a social organ than it is a thinking organ. And if we want our brains to develop well, that needs to happen in interrelationship. And here's a segment of our definition of charity. To live a life of love is to have the power and courage to respond to all people and events with compassion that seeks the well-being of the other and the common good. Eco-spirituality is about developing what Matthew Fox beautifully describes as an amongness consciousness. He says we are challenged to think of ourselves in relationship rather than as objects, as me and you, self and other. So pause for a few moments and feel love in your heart for all you see and imagine within, around, above, and below, and beyond you in our universe. And what about education? In our definition, we include coming to recognize our interdependence. Thomas Berry prophesied that education could be defined now in a new way. Education, he said, might well be defined as knowing the story of the universe, of the planet Earth, of life systems, and of consciousness, all as a single story, and recognizing the human role in the story. I would add to this that we need not only to re-educate people regarding their worldview, but also our understanding that becoming fully human requires not just knowledge, but to grow in our consciousness, something that everyone goes through at their own pace. And finally, here is a segment of our definition of justice. Justice helps us recognize the dignity, equality, and rights of all persons. It calls us to be faithful to the demands of relationship. Thomas Berry calls this the great work, the work of ensuring a just, healthy, beautiful, and sustainably life-giving world for future generations of all species. Now, I would like us to consider how our own personal and congregational growth in living out our core values connects with these words from our directional statements. We, together as BVM sisters and associates and friends, drawn by grace into living more profoundly into the mystery of God, into living more consciously or our interconnectedness with all of creation, into living more intensely our understanding of freedom, into living more acutely and publicly values aligned with the gospel. In other words, how did we get here? And where are we going as persons, as a congregation, as a human species? Would we have written those direction statements 10, 20, 30 years ago? One of the core fundamental principles operating in our universe is growth from simplicity to complexity. Barbara Marx Hubbard aptly describes this as one of the key lessons of evolution. She writes, quote, "Evolution raises consciousness and freedom. This lesson is the most important of all. As a system becomes more complex, from non-life to life, from single cells to animal, from animal to human, it jumps in consciousness and freedom. Each is a jump through greater complexity. At the heart of that complexity is interdependence. The interdependence of cells, of organs, of plants and animals, wind and rain, of humans with one another and with it all," unquote. Before we go into small groups to talk about that image and the process of growth towards interdependence and greater love, I want to address the issue that sometimes comes up. Are some people on this journey better than others? In speaking to this issue of better, the mystic and author Dorothy McLean wrote, "It is not for the caterpillar to say that the butterfly must eat leaves all day long and crawl about while the butterfly is actually flying. The old rules still apply to the caterpillar. New rules apply to the butterfly. The caterpillars of this world need to not be upset because the butterflies are around. And the butterfly is the same creature transformed with a different way of living." Another image for nature, of course, is the acorn and the oak. The potential for the oak is in the acorn. Only its unique process of transformation allows the acorn to transform into something that can bear fruit and continue to unfold the promise of life. We would never say that either the butterfly or the caterpillar or the acorn or the oak is better. Such categorizations are a device of the human ego. We need to help people see that, and also that in the end, it's all about the capacity to bear fruit. The acorn is only a single entity. The tree produces hundreds of thousands of acorns. So now with Katie's help, I'm going to invite you back into a small group conversation, and I hope it works better than it worked the last time, but I hope you did have a good conversation. And again, 10 minutes into groups of 2 to ponder this image of the intersection of our core values and our growth from dependence to interdependence as individuals and as a collective. All right, welcome back. I think we have everybody back now. And I think I was going to share a slide, but I don't think we need to. I might share a couple of closing slides, but what I'd like to do now is have a large group conversation, maybe we have a few minutes before the hour ends. And if there is anybody who would want to just respond to the question, what I was thinking of asking is, what is shifting for you as a result of your experience here today? Is there any movement or shifting taking place for you, or any insight you'd like to share with the large group? If you could unmute yourself or raise your hand or give an indication that you want to speak. We'll try to call on you. Otherwise, just jump in, unmute yourself and jump in. If you want to raise your hand, you go to the reactions button at the bottom.
Okay.
Oh, Marianne,
Okay.
I wasn't sure if you were.
Yeah, I was
trying
trying
to
your
computer screen or raising your hand. Okay,
I was trying to get it unmuted. I just have a simple comment, and it is that actually, Pat, I'm so grateful because I never thought about connecting our core values to this whole new consciousness in the way that you've done it today. And I have been looking at our core values and thinking we need to update these a little bit, but now I'm realizing they don't need to be updated. I need to update my awareness of their connection with our story now. So I'm really grateful.
Oh, thank you. Thanks a lot.
Yeah.
Pat, I just want to say that the image that will stay with me is that butterfly and the caterpillar, a very, very strong, and the acorn and the tree. So thank you for capturing your whole presentation in that kind of image, which for many of us stays in our consciousness. And so thank you.
Sure. Yeah. Pat Talba, did you want to comment?
Yeah, thank you. Thank you, Pat. You really brought it together in a capsule for us today. Thank you for your time and effort in presenting this. What shifted for me today, which was quite remarkable and maybe shocking to those that are online today, but the words we use for our core values, I think, are outdated. And for example, freedom, how wonderful it would be to change that to mutual indwelling. You know, something more core that really moves us into the the present time. And for example, justice, the great work of being accountable to all species. But those words just did not resonate anymore.
Mm.
So that was a huge shift. Oh boy. Thank you.
Yeah. You're welcome. Thank you, Pat.
Mhm.
Oh,
Pat-
Helen.
Oh, go ahead.
Me?
Helen Gable. Yeah, sorry.
Okay, that would be me. I have to agree with Marilyn on the image of the butterfly and the caterpillar. I was really struck with that. I think, you know, I've been crawling along on a limb for a long time, and thinking everybody else had the great life and flying around and looking beautiful, but I've found myself allowing myself to evolve more into flying around like that butterfly, and I don't know, being more open and whatever, with the help of many people, as you know. That's all.
Yeah, thank you. Susan Kohler?
Pat, I'm curious about the notion of the evolution of the eco-spirituality growing more and more complex, because in some ways for me, and I'm curious if others feel the same way, it also feels like it's simpler as well. And I'm not sure exactly why, but I mean, in some ways to say we are all one is a much simpler concept than a lot of other concepts in my mind. So I'm trying to kind of struggle with those two notions.
Yeah, I think in terms of, I think the way I would look at it is the concept that we all are all one, for me, points towards wholeness, that it's all, that's what we're striving for is wholeness. But as we become interdependent, and that it means that we are going to be more complex, just the way the human body is made up of all these different organs, as you know, I'm going to show my ignorance of scripture here, but who was it who, I think it's Paul, who talks about the, you know, the Christ is the body, and we're all these different parts, but we're one body, but we're made up of different things. So in nature, you know, an ecosystem, it's all the different parts. It's the deer and the trees and the wolves and it's all these different things. So it is more complex than certainly a single-celled organism. I mean, we are the result of the evolution from a single-celled organism into something that's much more complex, but works because it's interdependent, because everything works together. So I think it's the image, the bigger image is one of wholeness, but it is more complex. And once, as you get into interdependence rather than a single entity, a single cell. That's kind of how I'm looking at it. But I get what you're saying, that to be able to say it's all one, the universe is all one, is a nice, isn't as hard to hold on to as saying the universe is actually very complex, interdependent in thing that functions as a whole.
I know you're probably ready to close us up, Pat, but my image for that is the Russian dolls. That if you see the smallest one, it's whole, but it's also a part of the second doll that goes down in the third doll. And another image that I have that I like a lot is the prairie, where if there's only one thing growing in the prairie, if the prairie is there, but if there's only one thing growing there, the soil is not good. It's only when there are a lot of different flowers and plants and trees that the soil itself becomes richer. So you can look at the individual flower, but you can also look at the prairie, which is one. So it's both one and complex at the same time.
Yeah, thanks, Kathy. Well, it is on my computer 4:02, so people are free to go. That was the time frame that we set. Thank you very much. I will send out, as I said, the slide packet, and if you got here because you know somebody like Betty Gambonini and you're not on the BVM mailing list, you can ask her for the slides. or me, P. Bombard at bvmsisters.org. And I do have at the end of the slide some suggested readings, like that book by Gerald Huther on the Compassionate Brain, or Margaret Placenta Johnson's book, or Carolyn Tobin's book with wonderful quotes from Thomas Berry. So that'll be at the end of this PowerPoint presentation. Okay, thank you all for coming.
Thank you.
Good, Pat, and I want to just say on behalf of the Care for Creation Committee that is made up of Katie and Rosemary Myers and Marguerite Murphy, we thank you for presenting and challenging us today to make that profound shift of mind, you know, in our becoming more fully human. And like others have said, your image of butterfly, you know, cocoon to butterfly to, you know, acorn to tree, we're constantly evolving, you know, and sometimes we think of just, you know, nature out there evolving, but we are constantly evolving. So may we continue to do that. And thank you for calling us to continue to evolve in our understanding of who we are as a community, as a circle of friends, and as human beings living amidst all of God's creation. So thank you profoundly, Pat.
Oh, you're welcome, Betty. Thank you. I hope you get the point too, that it's about bearing fruit. It's about blooming. It's about growing so that you can bloom. And for me, this is a blooming. This is like taking everything I've studied and thought about and reflected on, and then I get this hour to bloom with all of you. So thank you very much.
Thank you.
Enjoy the rest of your Sunday.
Thank you.
Good. It's great to see everybody, and
Yes.
hopefully we can do another one of these sometime along the way. So enjoy the rest of your day and weekend, which is coming to a quick close. And for a number of us here, we'll see you live sometime soon. And if not live, we'll continue to do Zooming, no matter where we are. So thank you very much.
Thank you, Katie, and
Thank you.
for the
Thank you.
logistics.
Yes,
And know
thank you,
that we
Katie.
will
For,
miss our
Thanks.
3 BVMs on the West Coast.
Thank you, Care for Creation.
oh, yes. Thank you, Fran Kearney, who was a Holy Name sister, we've become sort of one community out here, Holy Names and BVM. So thank you. Yeah.
Yes.
And Rosemary too. I didn't see you on
Yeah.
there. Good.
Yeah.
Great. Good. Okay.
Yeah. Blessings.
Thanks, everyone.
Blessings to all of you. Have a good day. Okay.